no settled provision at all, and certainly no respectable relations. She is known only as parlour boarder at a common school. She is not a sensible girl, not a girl of any information. She has been taught nothing useful, and is too young and too simple to have acquired anything herself. At her age, she can have no experience, and with her little wit, is not very likely ever to have any that can avail her. She is pretty and she is good-tempered, and that is all. My only scruple in advising the match was on his account, as being beneath his deserts, and a bad connection for him. I felt that as to fortune, in all probability he might do much better, and that as to rational companion or useful helpmate, he could not do worse, but I could not reason so to a man in love, and was willing to trust to there being no harm in her, to her having that sort of disposition which, in good hands like his, might be easily led aright, and turned out very well. The advantage of the match I felt to be all on her side, and had not the smallest doubt, nor have I now, that there would be a general cry out upon her extreme good luck. Even your satisfaction I made sure of. It crossed my mind immediately that you should not regret your friend's leaving Highbury for the sake of her being settled so well. I remember leaving Highbury for this. I remember saying to myself, even Emma, with all her partiality for Harriet, will think this is a good match. I cannot help wondering at your knowing so little of Emma as to say any such thing. What? Think a farmer, with all his sense and all his merit, Mr. Martin is nothing more a good match for my intimate friend, not to regret her leaving Highbury for the sake of marrying a man whom I could never admit as an acquaintance of my own. I wonder you should think it possible for me to have such feelings. I assure you mine are very different. I must think your statement by no means fair. You are not just to Harriet's claim. They would be estimated very differently by others as well as myself. Mr. Martin would be the richer of the two, but he is undoubtedly her inferior to rank in society. The sphere in which she moves is much above his. It would be a degradation to illegitimacy and ignorance to be married to a respectable, intelligent gentleman farmer. As to the circumstances of her birth, though in legal sense she may be called nobody, it will not hold in common sense. She is not to pay for the offence of others, by being held below the level of those with whom she is brought up. There can scarcely be a doubt that her father is a gentleman, and a gentleman of fortune. Her allowance is very liberal. Nothing has ever been begrudged for her improvement or comfort. That she is a gentleman's daughter is undoubtable to me. That she associates with gentlemen's daughters, no one, I apprehend, will deny. She is superior to Mr. Robert Martin. Whoever be her parents, said Mr. Knightley, whoever may have had the charge of her, it does not appear to have been any part of their plan to introduce her into what you would call good society. After receiving a very indifferent education, she is left in Miss Goddard's hands to shift as she can, to move in short, in Mrs. Goddard's line, to have Mrs. Goddard's acquaintance. Her friends evidently thought this good enough for her, and it was good enough. She desired nothing better herself, till you chose to turn her into a friend, and mine had no distaste for her own set, nor any ambition beyond it. She was as happy as possible with the Martins in the summer. She had no sense of superiority then. If she has it now, you have given it. You have been no friend to Harriet Smith, Emma. Robert Martin would never have proceeded so far if he had not felt persuaded of her not being disinclined to him. I know him well. He has too much real feeling to address any woman on the haphazard of selfish passion, and as to conceit, he is the farthest from it of any man I know. Depend upon it, he had encouragement. It was represent them. She is not a clever girl, but she has better sense than you are aware of, and does not deserve to have her understanding spoken of so slightingly. Waiving that point, however, and supposing her to be, as you describe her, only pretty and good-natured, let me tell you that in the degree she possesses them, they are not trivial recommendations to the world in general, for she is, in fact, a beautiful girl, and must be thought so by 99 people out of 100, until it appears that men are much more philosophic on the subject of beauty than they are generally supposed, till they do fall in love with well-informed minds instead of handsome faces. A girl with such loveliness as Harriet has a certainty of being admired and sought after, of having the power of choosing from among many, consequently a claim to be nice. Her good nature, too, is not so very slight a claim, comprehending as it does real, thorough sweetness of temper and manner, a very humble opinion of herself, and a great readiness to be pleased with other people. I am very much mistaken if your sex in general would not think such beauty and such temper the highest claims a woman could possess. Upon my word, Emma, to hear you abusing the reason you have is almost enough to make me think so too. Better be without sense than misapply it as you do. To be sure, she cried plaintively, I know that the feeling of you all, I know that such a girl as Harriet is exactly what every man delights in, what at once bewitches his senses and satisfies his judgment. Oh, Harriet may pick and choose. Were you yourself ever to marry, she is the very woman for you. And is she at 17 just entering into life, just beginning to be known, to be wondered at, because she does not accept the first offer she receives? No, pray let her have her time to look about her. I have always thought it very foolish intimacy, said Mr. Knightley presently, though I have kept my thoughts to myself. But I now perceive that it will be very unfortunate one for Harriet. You will puff her up with such ideas of her own beauty, and of what she has claim up to her, with such that in a little while nobody within her reach will be good enough for her. Vanity working on a weak head produces every sort of mischief. Nothing so easy as for a young lady to raise her expectations too high. Miss Harriet Smith may not find offers of marriage flowing fast, though she is a very pretty girl. Men of sense, whatever you may choose to say, do not want silly wives. Men of family would not be very fond of connecting themselves with a girl of such obscurity, and most prudent men would be afraid of the inconvenience and disgrace they might be involved in when the mystery of her parentage come to be revealed. Let her marry Robert Martin, and she is safe, respectable, and happy forever. But if you encourage her to expect to marry greatly, and teach her to be satisfied with nothing less than a man of consequence and large fortune, she may be a parlour boarder at Mrs. Goddard's all the rest of her life, or at least till she grows desperate and is glad to catch at the old writing master's son. We think so very differently on this point, Mr. Knightley, that there can be no use in canvassing it. We shall only be making each other more angry. But as to my letting her marry Robert Martin, it is impossible. She has refused him, and so decidedly, I think, as much prevent any second application. She must abide by the evil of having refused him, whatever it may be, and so to the refusal itself. I will not pretend to say that I have not influenced her a little, but I assure you there was very little for me or for anybody to do. His appearance is so much against him, and his manners so bad, that if she ever were disposed to favour him, nonsense as ever was stalked," cried Mr. Knightley. "Robert Martin's manners have sense, sincerity, and good humour to recommend them, and his mind has more true gentility than Harriet Smith could understand." Emma made no answer, and tried to look cheerfully unconcerned, but was really feeling uncomfortable and wanting him very much to be gone. She did not repent what she had done, and she still thought herself a better judge of such a point of a female right and refinement than he could ever be, but yet she had a sort of habitual respect for his judgment in general, which made her dislike having it so loudly against her, and to have him sitting just opposite to her in an angry state was very disagreeable. Some minutes passed in this unpleasant silence, with only one attempt on Emma's side to talk of the weather, but he made no answer. He was thinking. The result of his thoughts appeared at last in these words: "Robert Martin has no great loss, if he can but think so, and I hope it will not be long before he does. Your views for Harriet are best known to yourself, but as you make no secret of your plan of love matching, it is fair to suppose that views and plans and projects you may have. As a friend, I shall just hint to you that if Elton is the man, I think it will all be labour in vain." Emma laughed and exclaimed. He continued, "Depend upon it, Elton will not do. Elton is a very good sort of man, a very respectable vicar of Highbury, but not at all likely to make an imprudent match. He knows the value of a good income as well as anybody. Elton may talk sentimentally, but he will act rationally. He is as well acquainted with his own claims as you can be with Harriet's. He knows that he is a very handsome young man, and a great favourite wherever he goes, and from his general way of talking in unreserved moments, when there are only men present, I am convinced that he does not mean to throw himself away. I have heard him speak with great animation of a large family of young ladies that his sisters are intimate with, who have all £20,000 apiece." "I am very much obliged to you," said Emma, laughing again. "If I had set my heart on Mr. Elton's marrying Harriet, it would only have been very kind to open my eyes, but at present I only want to keep Harriet to myself. I am done with matchmaking indeed. I could never hope to equal my own doings at Randall's. I shall leave off while I am well." "Good morning to you," he said, rising and walking off abruptly. He was very much vexed. He felt the disappointment of the young man, and was mortified to have been the means of promoting it, by the sanction he had given, and the parts in which he was persuaded Emma had taken in the affair was provoking him exceedingly. Emma remained in a state of vexation too, but there was more indistinctness in the causes of hers than in his. She did not always feel so absolutely satisfied with herself, so entirely convinced that her opinions were right and her adversaries wrong, as Mr. Knightley. He walked off in more complete self-approbation than he had left for her. She was not so materially cast down, however, but that a little time and the return of Harriet were very adequate restoratives. Harriet's staying away so long was beginning to make her uneasy. The possibility of the young man's coming to Mrs. Goddard's that morning and meeting with Harriet and pleading his own cause gave alarming ideas. The dread of such failure, after all, became the prominent uneasiness, and when Harriet appeared, and in very good spirits, and without having any such reason to give for her long absence, she felt a satisfaction which settled her in her own mind, and convinced her that let Mr. Knightley think or say what he would, she had done nothing letters, but he might naturally be rather attentive than otherwise to them. But then Mr. Knightley did not make due allowance for the influence of a strong passion at war with all interested motives. Mr. Knightley saw no such passion, and of course thought nothing of its effects. But she saw too much of it to feel a doubt of its overcoming any hesitations that a reasonable prudence might originally suggest, and more than a reasonable, becoming degree of prudence. She was very sure she did not belong to Mr. Elton. Harriet's cheerful look and manner established hers. She came back, not to think of Mr. Martin, but to talk of Mr. Elton. Miss Nash had been telling her something, which he repeated immediately with great delight. Mr. Perry had been to Mrs. Goddard's to attend the sick child, and Miss Nash had seen him, and he had told Miss Nash that as she was coming back yesterday from Clayton Park, he had met Mr. Elton, and found to his great surprise that Mr. Elton was actually on his road to London, and not meaning to return till the morrow, though it was the whist club night, which he had never been known to miss before, and Mr. Perry had redemonstrated with him about it, and told him how shabby it was in him, their best player, to absent himself, and tried very much to persuade him to put off his journey only one day, but it would not do. Mr. Elton had been determined to go on, and had said in a very particular way indeed, that he was going on business which he would not put off for any inducement in the world, and something about a very enviable commission, and being the bearer of something exceedingly precious. Mr. Perry could not quite understand him, but he was very sure there must be a lady in the case, and he told him so. And Mr. Elton only looked very conscious and smiling, and rode off in great spirits. Miss Nash had told her all this, and had talked a great deal more about Mr. Elton, and said, looking so very significantly at her, that she did not pretend to understand what his business might be, but she only knew that any woman whom Mr. Elton could prefer, she should think the luckiest woman in the world, for beyond a doubt Mr. Elton had not his equal for beauty or agreeableness. Mr. Knightley might quarrel with her, but Emma could not quarrel with herself. He was so much displeased that it was longer than usual before he came to Hartfield again, and when they did meet, his grave look shrewd, though was not forgiven. She was sorry, but could not repent. On the contrary, her plans and proceedings were more and more justified, and endeared to her by the general appearance of the next few days. The picture, elegantly framed, came safely to hand soon after Mr. Elton's return, and being hung over the mantelpiece of the common sitting-room, he got up to look at it, and sighed out of his half-sentences of admiration, just as he ought. And as for Harriet's feelings, they were visibly forming themselves into as strong and steady an attachment as a youth and sort of mind admitted. Emma was soon perfectly satisfied of Mr. Martin being no otherwise remembered than as he furnished a contrast with Mr. Elton of the utmost advantage to the latter. Her views of improving her little friend's mind by a great deal of useful reading and conversation had never yet led to more than a few chapters, and the intention of going on tomorrow. It was much easier to chat than to study, much pleasanter to let her imagination range and work at Harriet's fortune, than to be labouring to enlarge her comprehension, or exercise it on sober facts, and the only literary pursuit which engaged Harriet at present, the only mental pursuit she was making for the evening of life, was the collecting and transcribing all the riddles of every sort that she could meet with into a thin quarter of hot-pressed paper, made up by her friend, and ornamented with ciphers and trophies. In this age of literature, such collections on a very grand scale are not uncommon. Miss Nash, head teacher at Mrs. Goddard's, had written out at least 300, and Harriet, who had taken the first hint of it, well-known charade. My first doth affection denote, which my second is destined to feel, and my whole is the best antidote, that affliction to soften and heal. Made her quite sorry to acknowledge that they had transcribed it some pages ago already. Why will you not write one for us, Mr. Elton? Said she. That is the only security for its freshness, and nothing could be easier to you. Oh, no. He had never written, hardly ever, anything of the kind in his life. The stupidest fellow. He was afraid not even Miss Woodhouse. He stopped for a moment, or Miss Smith's could inspire him. The very next day, however, produced some proof of inspiration. He called for a few minutes, just to leave a piece of paper on the table, containing, as he said, a charade, which a friend of his had addressed to a young lady, the object of his admiration, but which, from his manner, Emma was immediately convinced must be his own. I do not offer it for Miss Smith's collection, said he. Being my friends, I have no right to expose it in any degree to the public eye, but perhaps you may not dislike looking at it. The speech was more to Emma than to Harriet, which Emma could understand. There was a deep consciousness about him, and he found it easier to meet her eyes than her friends. He was gone the next moment, after another moment's pause. Take it, said Emma, smiling and pushing the paper towards Harriet. It is for you. Take your own. But Harriet was in a tremor and could not touch it, and Emma, never loth to be first, was obliged to examine it herself. To Miss, my first displays the wealth and pomps of kings, lords of the earth, their luxury and ease. Another view of man, my second brings. Behold him there, the monarch of the seas. But, united, what reserve we have. Man's boasted power and freedom, all are flown. Lord of the earth and sea, he bends a slave, and woman, lovely woman, reigns alone. Thy ready wit with word will soon supply, may its approval beam in that soft eye. She cast her eye over it, pondered, caught the meaning, read it through again to be quite certain, and quite mistress of the lines, and then passing it to Harriet, sat happily smiling and saying to herself, while Harriet was puzzling over the paper in all confusion of hope and dullness, Very well, Mr. Elton, very well indeed. I have read worse charades. Courtship. Very good hint. I give you credit for it. This is feeling your way. This is saying very plainly, pray, Miss Smith, give me leave to pay my addresses to you, approve my charade and my intentions in the same glance. May its approval beam in that soft eye. Harriet, exactly. Soft is the very word for her eye. Of all epithets, the justice that could be given. Thy ready wit the law the word will soon supply. Hump. Harriet's ready wit, all the better. A man must be very much in love indeed to describe her so. Ah, Mr. Knightley, I wish you had the benefits of this. I think this would convince you for once in your life that you would be obliged to own yourself mistaken. An excellent charade indeed, and very much to the purpose. Things must come to crisis soon now. She was obliged to break off from the very pleasant observations, which were otherwise of a sort to run into great lengths, by the eagerness of Harriet's wondering questions. What can he be, Miss Woodhouse? What can he be? I have not an idea, I cannot guess in the least. What can it possibly be? Do try to find out, Miss Woodhouse. Do help me. I never saw anything so hard. Is it Kingdom? I wonder who the friend was, and who could be the young lady. Do you think it is a good one? Can he be a woman? And woman, lovely woman, reigns alone. Can he be Neptune? Behold him there, the monarch of the seas, or a trident, or a mermaid, or a shark. Oh no, shark is the only one syllable. Must be very clever, or he would have not brought it. Oh, Miss Woodhouse, do you think we shall ever find out? Mermaids and sharks, nonsense, my dear Harriet, resist a delightful persuasion. She read the concluding lines and was all flutter and happiness. She could not speak, but she was not wanted to speak. It was enough for her to feel. Emma spoke for her. "There is so pointed and so particular a meaning in this compliment," said she, "that I cannot have a moment's doubt as to Mr. Elton's intentions. You are his object, and he will soon receive the completest proof of it. I thought it must be so. I thought I could not be so deceived, but now it is clear the state of his mind is as clear and decided as my wishes on the subject has ever been since I knew you. Yes, Harriet, just so long have I been waiting the very circumstance to happen which has happened. I could never tell whether an attachment between you and Mr. Elton were most desirable or natural. Its probability and its eligibility have really so equalled each other. I am very happy. I congratulate you, my dear Harriet, with all my heart. This is an